The amount of dentists I know who at the end of the first year literally get a brown envelope and they're told they've got to pay 10, 12, 15, 20,000 pounds in tax. Nobody told them. It's a terrible situation. If we zoom out, we need to remember that dentistry is a caring profession. It's health care. It naturally draws in people that do care. They do care and they want to do the right thing by their patients. They want to deliver the best outcome. If something doesn't go well, it'll play on their mind. But you don't ever just care about one thing. If you're a caring person, you care. So not only do you care about your patients, you care about your team, you care about your family, you care about your parents. You care across the board. And caring can be quite draining, particularly when your work requires you to care as well.
Today, I'm super excited to welcome Andy Acton to The Patient Is Always Right. Andy is one of the most well-known figures in the dental industry here in the UK, and he's synonymous with helping dental practice owners navigate the business of dentistry. He's going to be sharing some secrets about how to scale and sell your dental practice, how to optimize for success, and also how to avoid owner fatigue. Andy successfully co-hosted over 200 episodes of his own podcast, Dentology, and today he's sharing some of his stories with the dental world. So tune in and join me. Welcome to Andy. Andy, thank you so much for coming on the show. The Patient Is Always Right. Really, really appreciate it.
Thank you for the invite. Looking forward to it.
We're very honored to have you. And your name is synonymous with dental business. Just very excited to get some of your insights today about what it takes to run and scale and ultimately sell a practice. We're going to talk a little bit about owner fatigue, which is a term that you coined rather. And so I'd love to dive into that because also I think from a personal point of view, that's very, very much relatable, I think, for any business owner. Really. Sure. So can't wait to hear more about that. Before we start, I just want to do a quick rapid fire round.
Yeah, sure.
So just a this or that, system one only, subconscious, like straight out, okay? So buy or build?
Buy.
Okay. Mixed or private?
Mixed.
Okay. Growth by acquisition or growth by optimization?
Optimization.
Okay. And a bigger practice with burnout or a smaller one with balance?
Smaller one with balance.
Okay. That's fairly easy. Okay. Interesting. You said mixed. Why mixed?
The NHS gets a really hard time. And there's a lot of, particularly on social media, people bashing the NHS. However, from a business perspective, an NHS contract isn't actually terrible news because many NHS contracts are going to break even, possibly put a little bit in the pot. But what they also do is they bring in a lot of patients to your practice. From a marketing point of view, and you know this from your world, it's amazing because you can offer NHS treatments, you can tell the world you're an NHS practice, and that brings a flow of patients to your practice. As we know, not all treatments are available on the NHS. So they can be a great opportunity to convert patients ethically and appropriately and properly for the private side of things. If you have a purely private practice, you're having to compete in a much more commercial world without access to that flow of patients to your practice. So that's why at the moment, for me, I would still favour mixed over private.
Interesting. And I mean, a lot of principals, I think, would say that, once that there's a framing problem there insofar that if a patient has inquired on the basis of it having an NHS contract and it's full or there's no capacity or whatever, then it's almost like an uphill battle to then get them to commit to private treatment. Or it almost, the conversation starts off in a negative way. Sorry, we can't help you with that. But, so how do people sort of overcome that? Because I think that's as much a problem in the heads of the receptionists who are dealing with those queries and the principals as it is perhaps in the patient's mind. But how do people kind of overcome that framing challenge?
And I think that's a training communication issue. I think people need to be well trained about how to reframe the fact that they do want to help them, they do have capacity, and then try and find out a bit more about their situation. And I think sometimes there's a bit of a misnomer between the cost of receiving NHS treatment and the cost of private treatment. You still make a contribution towards your NHS treatment, but the service you receive as a private patient will be different from an NHS patient. So I think there's training around the communication of how you explain that to patients. Ultimately, if it's not for them, that's okay. Because if you are looking to grow the private side of your practice, you don't need too many patients. So if you had quite a drop-off of people who said, well, that's not really for me, I want to access NHS dentistry, that's fine. You just might not be the practice for them.
Yeah, no, there seems to be two camps. Some people say, no, I don't want an NHS contract because it's sort of going to taint the private side and it's not going to work. Yesterday, I was with a practice owner who owns 5 practices in Kent, and that is his model. He'd won various tenders, and he very successfully has built a private side to the practice off the back of an NHS contract, because I think he over delivers in terms of expectations.
Yeah.
So when you walk into the practice, it looks private, it feels premium, but there is an NHS contract, and that is the base. And so I think it's a divided camp, basically.
And it is. And I think that styling of how you position it is quite important.
Yeah.
I think if you're running a bog standard, hard plastic chairs, hamster wheel approach to delivering dentistry that looks and feels very NHS, to then try and convert people to private is quite difficult. I think the way that you've just described is absolutely on point. I think what you need to have is a private styled practice that happens to offer NHS, because I think the ability to convert patients that way is way easier than having a predominantly NHS practice that looks, feels, and sometimes smells like an NHS practice. And trying to convert those, that's not easy.
Very interesting. And you said buy rather than build. So again, I'd love to dive into that a little bit. Now, obviously, you specialize in buying and selling of dental practices, or helping clinicians do that. Why would you generally encourage people to buy rather than set up a squad?
This goes back to dental school.
Yeah.
At dental school, dentists are taught to be clinicians. There is no element at all in any dental school in the country that devotes a single lecture to business. So when you qualify as a dentist, you're a great clinician. Yeah. And as a patient, I'm cool with that.
Yeah.
That is really good news for me, because I don't really give a fig whether they understand meta ads or the latest HR legislation. I want them to be a good clinician. However, when they qualify and they move into being a dentist after their FD year, whether they're an associate or a principal, they're in business and they need to understand business. And as business people, we tend to have to be good at lots of things, not excellent at one thing. Yep. As a dentist, you're excellent at one thing. So what that means is that when you then get to a stage whether you decide to buy or build a dental practice, most dentists, and this is a generalisation, are ill-equipped and they don't have the business skills required to start a business from scratch, which is why for the majority, buying is a way safer bet than building a practice. If you buy a practice and that goes well, your second one, you might build it. But I think starting out from being an associate and just building a practice off the bat, it's been done. And some people have done it really well. Yeah. But they are the rare.
They are the rare. Interesting. And so I guess we can get into this a little bit later in terms of how people build and run successful practices. But I think one of the things that I often discuss with associates when they're sort of thinking about their next step is like, don't jump ship and spend lots of money on kitting out space and overcommitting on costs and rent and rates and et cetera. Instead, de-risk your journey. And I think some of the associatepreneurs that you and I know, common friends and clients, they've sort of done that quite well because they end up renting a surgery and they sort of de-risk that journey. They build their personal brand. They establish their own book of patients. They start doing their own marketing to a point where eventually then they can fill a day, 2 days, 3 days, and then they can grow into a practice of their own, which I guess is maybe a slightly safer way to do it.
I think it is. And I think if you roll back perhaps only 5-6 years, that wasn't doable. I think now with the reach of social media, there's people that have the ability to do that. And there's also environments that support it. Yep. So Until, as an example, probably familiar with it, but it's set up where you can effectively rent space. Yep. So you give a commitment and you rent 1 day a week or 2 days a week. So you can generate your own patients through your personal brand, and you can then take them into their environment and treat them. Yep. Or you can rent space depending on where you are in the country. So it's a safer way of doing it. That is quite an interesting approach because you do have the ability to start to build your business before you commit. It can be challenging for practice owners if they have an associate in their practice who's doing that, and there's issues around, well, who owns that goodwill, that side of things. But with good communication, and a lot of life is about good communication, isn't it? With good communication, that can be navigated. But there is the opportunity for associates to start to build a business, but without anchoring to a physical location, and then anchoring to a physical location once they've got critical mass.
We've seen some associates do it, and it's been kind of life changing, and they've sort of de-risked that journey, which is great. You've often been called the GOAT when it comes to greatest of all time.
When it comes to bar on so much.
When it comes to dental business, and in particular the buying and selling of dental practices, you've overseen some £2.5 billion in transactions, which is phenomenal. That's a huge claim. And I think you bought the business in 2000, didn't
Yes,
you?
it was
25 years ago.
Yeah.
What originally drew you into the business side of dentistry? Because you come from a broking and finance background. So what was like, okay, dentistry, I'm going to double down. That is my niche.
I think it was going back to what I said about dental school. Unfortunately, dentists are mostly ill prepared for business. And because of my background and because of the services that Frank Taylor Associates offer, I just felt that we could really help the profession understand more about business, demystify some of the things around financials. Because quite often people get scared about numbers, but it's just because they don't understand them, because they don't really need to understand them. One of the fundamental issues with dentistry is the rewards, the financial rewards are quite good. And when that's the case, quite often you don't need to focus on the numbers that much, because actually it produces sufficient for what you want, and anything that's extra is nice. And there's a fundamental issue with that. And it's not as it was back in the early 2000s, but it's still pretty good. But I just felt that dentists needed to be better prepared for business and better informed about business.
Yeah, no, fair enough. I think that's really relatable. I mean, why is it that in 2025, there's still no business of dentistry course in in university? Well, because presumably to set up people for long-term success, eventually, even as an associate, you need to understand the fundamentals of business, because you are a business. You're running your own business, right? Why is that still such a gap when it sort of seems like an obvious communication, people management, leadership, business and finance?
I think we're in the commercial world, and dental schools are firmly in the academic world. Those two camps don't get on easily. And I think there's a fundamental issue that dental school, quite rightly, should focus on the clinical side of things. I also think that the nature of the program that they're delivering is becoming elongated. When I talk to dental students and younger dentists now, and you talk about their hands-on experience at dental school, it's nothing like it was to dentists who I taught that went through dental school 15, 20 years ago. They came out with way more clinical experience than the younger people. So the younger people are doing way more risk management, note-taking, mitigation of challenges, as opposed to getting practical experience. So because the nature of learning's changed and it's becoming more risk-averse and making sure that people are protected, there isn't really space in the syllabus to cover it. But also, I just don't think that the world of academia particularly likes the idea that there is a commercial element to dentistry. I mean, for example, I flew up to Newcastle at the beginning of the year to talk to a bunch of dental students about the business of dentistry. And the only way you could do that is it was out of hours in the evening.
Right.
It wasn't within the working day, even to the point where they weren't over the moon that it was actually taking place. And it's a shame. It is a shame because, as you say, even as an associate, you're a self-employed individual.
Yeah.
And not understanding the bare bones of business is going to be challenging, because it's stupid things like at no time does anybody get taught about tax. The amount of dentists I know who at the end of the first year literally get a brown envelope and they're told they've got to pay 10, 12, 15, 20,000 pounds in tax. Nobody told them.
Yeah.
So not unreasonably, the money they got, they've spent.
Yeah.
And now you're on the back foot from day one.
Yeah.
So now you're potentially
Catch
arrears
up.
with your tax. It's a terrible situation.
Yeah.
And it would be so easy to fix if you could do just half a day at some point during a 5-year learning program. You could cover off some of those fundamentals. So yeah, I'm frustrated by it, but I don't know if it's going to change anytime soon.
Yeah, no, it is sad. And I guess, I suppose universities, as you mentioned, are more academic. They're more clinically focused. Is it because it's ultimately healthcare that we're talking about and it's medical? Is it, is that why they just sort of ignore the business side of things altogether? Because business is, by its very nature, is about making profits, shareholder returns, et cetera, et cetera. Is it, or is it just so far outside of the sort of their ethos and the core curriculum that that's sort of managed by a completely different?
Yeah, I think it is the clinical thing. And don't get me wrong, I'm not in any way saying, let's chuck the clinical bit in the bin and let's go and make money. The clinical bit is absolutely important because it's around patient care. But my point is, if you're not able to do that profitably, you don't get to deliver the clinical bit.
Yeah.
So there's no point in having this misguided notion that it's just about clinical. Because if you can't do that profitably, you can't employ people, you can't invest in technology, you can't pay your rent, you can't train your team. Therefore, you cannot deliver good services. So the two, they have to go hand in hand. And I'd just like to see them just come a bit closer together, where it doesn't have to be as binary as it's clinical or it's commercial and you're making money. The two need to live together.
Yeah, and I think that works in, general medicine, for example, where you go to the NHS and it's a fully public sector environment and you're not expected to sell, you're not expected to charge, you're not expected to make a profit. But, we know that dentistry doesn't work like that, right?
No.
It's sort of this
And also, the NHS isn't in great shape.
No, well, absolutely. There's that, which is a whole separate topic. But, dentistry, if it was fully public, I would get it and I would understand. But we're in this sort of awkward quasi-public, let's have a...
It's a bit peculiar.
Yeah. And so then somehow it's a non-negotiable to set up clinicians for success, because even just to fulfill the NHS contract, I mean, we that's a whole separate episode anyway.
It is.
But it's sad. Hopefully we'll see some change in the next 5 to 10 years around that. But until then, obviously, there's people like yourself who are very generous with their time and their knowledge in terms of lifting up the community and sharing your insights and educating people. You talked a little bit about, obviously, how dental studies have changed to focus more on risk mitigation, presumably as a consequence of litigation risk, increased compliance and regulatory burden. That kind of neatly brings us on to this concept of owner fatigue, which you've coined and you've recently started talking more and more about, where, actually, perhaps you can give us a little bit of a TLDR in terms of how you sort of first stumbled across that, what it means when you first started noticing that as a pattern amongst clinicians.
So I've been doing what I do for about 25 years. And in the early years, you kind of going through the process and you're working with people and you're helping them. And then patterns start to emerge. And it was about 5 years ago, I started to notice that most people were coming to us around about 8 to 10 years of ownership. And just wanting to have a conversation about selling their practice for no specific reason. And obviously, the more you talk to people and the more you dig into finding out what's going on, it felt like there was just this cloud of fatigue that was hanging over people that had owned practices for about 8 to 10 years. And the more I looked at it and the more I talked to people, it actually seemed to break into 5 categories. So the first thing was the emotional load of owning and running a business. It never goes away. So if you're on the Sun Lounge in Ibiza or you're skiing in St. Moritz, wherever you are, you never get away from it. It's always there with you in the backpack. You're carrying that emotional load of owning and running a business.
I mean, that's 100% relatable as a non-clinician.
Yeah,
I mean,
and that's the thing you were saying at the beginning. It'll be interesting to see how you relate to this, because I don't think this is just a dental issue. The second category is lifestyle misalignment. And lifestyle misalignment is, we should be spending more time with the kids, we're playing with the kids, I should be doing my email. You've got this constant rubber band of you're being pulled one way or the other, and you kind of feel that you're not ever in the right place. You've then got decision fatigue. And decision fatigue is you're asked 100 questions a day. Yeah. And as the boss, you've got to give the answer. Yeah. Every single time you've got to give the answer. So that can be wearing and trying, because obviously, as leaders in a business, our job is to try and do some of the strategic stuff, but we get pulled into the weeds quite regularly. The fourth element is role creep. And role creep is, particularly for a dentist who owns a dental practice, I thought I was going to do clinical dentistry and be the CEO. Yep. No one ever said I was going to be doing HR, procurement, and crawling around on the floor trying to get my IT to work and cleaning and anything else that happened to turn up. Yeah. So you've got this role creep. And then the last part that actually does create stress as well is exit readiness. And it's in the context of lack of exit readiness. Because people don't know how they're going to get out of this situation, they have this stress about when does it end? When does it stop? Yeah. And it's those 5 categories that I think actually is owner fatigue. And there's different weightings in there depending on where you're at and how you feel and how old your kids are or how long you've been doing it. But that is owner fatigue. So it's not one thing. It's just this dripping tap of issues that build up. And you wake up one day and you can't quite put your finger on what it is, but you're like, I think I'm done. I think just owning and running a business around about that 8 to 10 year window is when I'm done. The The problem that it brings is that there's research out there that says big life decisions take between 2 and 5 years to make. So having a family, buying a business, getting married, the big stuff. Because most decisions we make in life, we think they're one-way doors, but they're not. They're two-way doors. We can come back. If we make a decision, it's not a good one. We just walk back through the door. We try something else. There's other things that aren't. So having a family, getting married. Ideally, we should.
That's more challenging to reverse.
We should plan
possible,
to. We should plan that it's a one-way door. And buying a business for lots of people in that moment, they feel that it's a one-way door. They'll come back at some point, but they don't kind of know when and how. And because of that big decision, this owner fatigue just sits as a heavy weight, sometimes for 1, 2, 3, 4 years. So by the time they talk to somebody like me, they're quite beaten up and drained. And that's a shame, because I want people to exit when their business is doing really well, they feel in good shape, and they've got the energy and the passion to go on and do something else.
Because the sale process in itself is a marathon, right? I mean, I've sold a business. It wasn't a very successful sale, but I still exited the business and sold it, and it sort of washed its face on the way out, which was fine. But just the process, the deal room, the due diligence, the share purchase agreement, the warranties, and I mean that's just the legal side of things. Was and you have to keep running the business whilst you're doing it, and so that in itself is. And
most people only ever do it once. Most people will only own one practice, and they'll only ever sever that business. So they're doing it blind. They don't really know what they're doing, and they need a lot of guidance and help to get through that process. And as you say, and by the way, keep doing the day job. You got to do that as well. And just being prepared it's so important. If you can be prepared, you can get through it quite nicely. If you're not, the stress levels are off the charts. And I say to my team all the time, we speak to people at one of the most stressful periods in their life, buying or selling a business. So we don't get to see the best of our clients. Sometimes people are angry and they're ranting, and lots of our clients, English might be their second or third language. So sometimes the vocabulary is not quite right. So you might feel that people are being blunt, but they're not. It's a language issue, and it's also a stress issue. So understanding the context of what's going on is really important.
I mean, that's a really big one, actually. And I think that sort of ties back to the emotional piece, which was the first pillar of the kind of the five you spoke about. And I'd love to ask you about the scorecard in a bit. But that emotional piece. So you talked about dental practice owners carrying the emotional burden of running a business and taking that with them to Ibiza or the mountains or whatever. How does that sort of manifest in people? Because presumably, what we find with our clinic owners, but also what I find in my business, is that you end up obviously feeling responsible and accountable for your team, their well-being, their careers, their progression, their happiness, retention of staff, happiness. But same with patients, right? I mean, practice owners, if they're still practicing clinicians, which most of them are, they're also dealing with their patients. And so do they end up sort of harboring all of those emotions and those troubles? And how does that sort of, what?
I think they tend to build it up. I mean, if we zoom out, we need to remember that dentistry is a caring profession. It's health care. So it naturally draws in people that do care. They do care and they want to do the right thing by their patients. They want to deliver the best outcome. If something doesn't go well, it'll play on their mind. But you don't ever just care about one thing. If you're a caring person, you care. So not only do you care about your patients, you care about your team, you care about your family, you care about your parents. So you care across the board. And caring can be quite draining, particularly when your work requires you to care as well. And that's where that emotional load, there isn't kind of a space where you can step away from it. And I think in the context of fatigue, quite often it's the dripping tap of things that build up. And it's having that lack of ability to move away. And the hard bit is the opposite of caring is not caring. Which sometimes and you don't really want to not care.
No, you don't want to not care. And I think at Ignite also we try to build I think naturally the team we built, it's all people that care about the results of their clients and stuff, which is great, because that's exactly what we want to do, and we want our clients to be successful. But then when it doesn't go to plan, it can be quite taxing. And sometimes I think I look over the fence, I'm like, it's almost easier to just not give a shit, because then you're not carrying that burden. But that obviously that's not the company I want to build or the life I want to lead. But it is tough. Caring can be draining.
I think the secret sauce is actually boundaries.
Yes. So
that's the trick.
But how do you set them? Because if your associate is going through divorce and they're not performing, they're not hitting their numbers, you want to be empathetic, and they've been with you for 13 years and they're ordinarily great. Like, how do you where do you draw the line? How do you set boundaries? Because see, a lot of leadership also, I mean, that's a topic that came up a lot on Friday when we spoke to a lot of our peers. Leadership isn't just about being a nice guy and being a friend to your team. It's also about sort of setting boundaries. But how do you do that? You know, if you still want to care and you don't want to upset people, how do you where do you draw the line, and how would you go about doing that?
I think you can start just simply by having time-based boundaries. You can say, look, I'm available and I'm going to be full on within these days and these times. But beyond that, unless literally something's on fire, I'm going to be off. And encourage your team to also do the same thing as well, because we can't be on all the time. You know, that whole thing, it's used as an analogy and it's a bit corny, but it's true in that the reason they say on aeroplanes, put your own mask on first before helping somebody else, is your bugger will use for somebody else if you're suffocating.
Collapse on the floor. Yeah, sure, yeah.
And it applies in business as well, that we need to make sure that we have ourselves in a good shape and healthy, otherwise we can't support other people. And I think a lot of people allow themselves to just do an extra hour.
Yeah.
Oh, I'll just catch up on emails on Saturday morning. And you do that as a one-off. And before you realise that you're doing it once a month.
It becomes a habit.
And then before the end of the year rolls in, you realise that you've actually done 15 weekends. And that's this creep. So having boundaries of when you're available and when you're not. It sounds easier than it is, because if people have been working in quite a chaotic and spread style, but by doing that, but also encouraging your team to do that, because like you say, as a leader, we set the pace and the rhythm of how our business operates. So if our team see us working into the evening, working weekends, it's like, well, I want to be a good team member, so perhaps I should do that.
Yeah.
But it's bad. It's not, because you're actually displaying bad traits, and people shouldn't be doing that. So I think just pulling back on the amount you do and having a start and stop time can be healthy, and you'll realise that by doing that, you'll have time to do things that you derive joy from with your family, or reading, or going to the cinema, or whatever else it might be. Just something that's different, because that also creates a little reset for your brain as well, because you're not constantly doing the same thing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think you've experimented with a 9-day fortnight.
Yeah.
Is that, I thought that was like a sort of a natural next conversation point, because you talk about setting boundaries and work-life balance, and also protecting, the boundaries of your team. So tell us a little bit about that, and how has that gone, and is that here to stay?
Yeah, so we looked at this a couple of years ago, and there's quite a lot of talk around it, and there was a trial. I think there's a couple of 100 companies, and they went on to a 4-day week to see how that would happen. So I looked at the results on that, and in most cases where people did a 4-day week, the service they were delivering was maintained, their team were happier, and there were no reportable downsides to doing this. So within our team, we're not able to go to a 4-day week, but we're able to go to a 9-day fortnight. So 5 days one week, 4 days the other. We saw similar results. There's been no drop off in service that we deliver to our clients. The team are happier. We initially thought that perhaps if they got 1 day off every other week, they might take up a new hobby or whatever, but I just think they're watching more Netflix. But that's fine. It's doing something different
for them.
But also, we've had no team member leave the business since then. And it wasn't by design. We didn't think of it as a retention strategy.
Yeah.
But if you think about it, if you get a 9-day fortnight, you've actually got 25 more days holiday a year.
That's a lot, yeah.
It's a huge amount.
Yeah.
So if you were thinking about going somewhere else, and sure, pay is a big part of your decision making, but particularly for younger people, pay is important, but the environment you're in and having personal time is important as well. I never thought that actually as a retention strategy, it was going to be really powerful, because if people were thinking about working somewhere else, how would that stack up against the terms that we offer? And it's gone down really well. And it also builds quite nice collaboration within teams, because team members check with one another
when they're going to be around,
when they're not going to be around, and is that okay? And
I
was going to take the Tuesday. Is that okay with you? Because I know you like to take the. So from that point of view, you kind of get this responsibility within teams to be good co-workers. So there's lots of good things that have come out of it. So we've been doing it now for a couple of years, and it's constantly under review. However, at the moment, we continue. We're going to run with it.
How do you manage that in client-facing roles where there's an expectation, for example, if there's a deal going through or whatever, obviously everyone takes responsibility for their own, their own role. But how do you balance that with managing client expectations?
So as a business, we've always been very careful to make sure that the client sits within the business. So we've got a really good CRM system.
Yeah.
So all client data sits within there. Anyone can access it. So when a client rings up, whilst everyone's going to have their pet favourites they'd like to talk to, if that person's not around, anybody can access that file and anybody can move it forward.
Yeah.
So we're not a business that says, Derek's your guy. If Derek's not around, unlucky. You have to wait till Derek's back. We as a business serve our clients. So doing it in a way like that actually set us up and supported us to be able to do a 9-day fortnight. I think if you're a business that allocates a person to a client, I think it's difficult. Yeah. And also I think within dentistry, where kind of the patients come into you in a practice, depending on the size of your business, it can be quite challenging.
Yeah.
But if you can do it, it's something that is worth exploring because, like I say, we haven't seen a downside in doing it, which is lovely.
Yeah, and there might be different iterations of that don't necessarily involve taking a 9-day fortnight, but there could be different sort of ways of achieving a similar effect. So very, very interesting. We talked a little bit about boundaries, and one question before we move on from that I wanted to ask you was around your own personal boundaries, because obviously you're a well-known figure within the UK dental scene and beyond. You're very accessible, you're very generous with your time, you're very available and visible, salient, as it were. It's a bit of personal branding 101 there. But when we first spoke, which you may or may not remember, but it was around COVID time, and I think Shaz gave me your number, and I called you, and you spent half an hour on the phone with me, and I was like, well, I was like, I've only been in this industry for 3 years, and from that day, you were very generous with your time. So, how do you kind of maintain that, but also you set boundaries when, let's say, a client of the business comes to you with a question, let's say your team hasn't responded to them, or let's say, they want you to look at their specific thing because you are, one of the two co-founders of the business. So how do you balance that? Because it's great to be accessible, but also it means that people can just DM you and, bring up stuff. And then the time boundaries you set, for example, on the weekend, I'm not going to go on social media, then people start to creep in. So how do you manage that?
Honestly, that's probably been the hardest thing to manage. I'm a nightmare for saying no. Okay. My default settings, yes.
Yeah. Okay. Which is why you ended up here.
Yeah. but that brings its own challenges.
Yeah.
I think I'm probably getting better at it.
Yeah.
And on the boundary side of things, I would only ever do it on my terms if it suits me. So my position is I'm not available on a general basis, evenings and weekends. However, for certain people in certain situations, I will, because I completely get that in the world that I'm in. So it's quite interesting. I'm quite visible within dentistry, and I work quite hard to make sure that people can see me. But the truth is, 95% of the work I do, nobody knows about, because I'm kind of confident. The stuff that I see and the people that I talk to, they don't really want their stuff to be public. So when you're dealing with people in that capacity, it's quite important that you're available to them when it matters to them.
Yeah.
So my boundaries are still quite flexible, and I take time out when it suits me, but not when it necessarily suits clients. So if somebody did need me on a weekend, and I've got a good relationship with them and I know it's important to them, I can make time available to them.
Yeah.
So it's an odd one that whilst I have boundaries, I flex those to suit me almost week by week. So it might be, actually a boundary might be Wednesday morning. I'm not available Wednesday morning. I've been helping people evenings and weekends. I'll take Wednesday morning out and I'll go for a swim or walk the dog or go for brunch with my wife or whatever it might be. So I'm not the sort of person that says Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, outside of that, tough luck. It doesn't, and I think and you'll have this as well as a business owner, life doesn't actually work like that.
No, sure.
And when things are important to somebody else, it's lovely if we are able to flex what we do to support them in that moment. Because we could have a 5-minute conversation with somebody and completely blow apart something that was bothering them immensely and was causing stress just by having a conversation with them.
You just pick up the phone.
Being able to do that is lovely. It's a real skill. It's a real gift to be able to do that for somebody. So to not do that because you've got this rigid boundary doesn't sit particularly well with me.
Yeah.
However, the flip side to that is you also need to make sure that you do allow yourself time out. You were saying about the event on Friday, and I was talking to Millard Shadru, the singing dentist, and we were having a conversation, and he was saying about his social battery. And he's somebody who is phenomenal at responding to messages, like really quick. For a moment, I felt special that it was just me, but he does it to everybody. He's remarkable at how well he does. But he says, you do get to a point where it just drains your social battery. So we do need to protect ourselves. But I think the grown-up side to that is also we need to make sure we are available for those right people. And I don't think you can pick up a book and learn how to do it.
No.
I think you just have to navigate that yourself and get to a level where you feel comfortable with being available and having some private time.
Yeah.
But also read clients. There will be some clients who you do something for them once and then they push the limits.
Yeah.
And then they push the limits. And before you know it, that's not good. And you were saying about selling a business. Selling a business can take 9 to 12 months. Establishing the protocols of how we communicate early on in a relationship is quite important. So very few people get the gold star treatment because those people have effectively earned it and that it really matters to them. Lots of people, we need to communicate them in a style that suits us because that just helps us actually deliver a really good service.
Yeah, absolutely. When you start compromising on that, that's when also service levels can drop. Yeah. No, it's interesting. I mean, that was partially a selfish question because, I came from a place where I made myself, I didn't really have any boundaries because in the beginning it was just me, it was my business. I wanted to over deliver for everyone.
And that's quite normal.
That's how you start, right?
Yeah, that's quite normal.
And then, in dentistry, you're then on WhatsApp and on Facebook Messenger and, you get phone calls and on email and then even if you try to set boundaries, if something slides in on a Friday, I remember quite early on in my journey, on a Friday night, I was on a date night with my wife and then in comes a message, boom, phone on the table, screen lights up, something about a campaign. And then you try to ignore it, but then it sits there and then it eats at you. And so I've tried to reestablish boundaries, but it's a never ending challenge to kind of, to juggle.
A really simple one. And I did this, it was around about COVID time, just after COVID. I have scheduled notifications.
Okay.
So most of my social media is on scheduled notifications. So they don't just turn up randomly because it can be so distracting.
Yeah.
So I get 2 notifications a day.
Okay.
One in the afternoon and one towards the end of my working day. And that way I can just check them all in one go. And I found that was a big help because when you're trying to do the deep focus work that matters to you and you keep getting distracted by things that are important for somebody else, but are they really important for you?
In that moment, especially.
And I found that by having a scheduled summary has really helped me focus on the things that are important to me and my business. It still means I'm providing a great service, but it doesn't mean that I respond within 10 minutes. I might respond within a few hours. But in the world I work in, that's okay.
Yeah, because I think that the cognitive price you pay for the context switching in that moment, when you're in deep focus and then...
Trying to get back into that phase,
it's impossible.
It can be really, really hard.
Yeah. Very good. Well, thanks for that. That was some good personal advice as well. What's been your biggest challenge, I guess, in your career? Perhaps, a large part of your career has been FTA. And what did that moment teach you?
It actually links to what we were just saying. I think the biggest challenge, and it's probably one that I'm still working on and getting better at, is saying no.
Okay.
I think that is a problem. And I think the reason it is a challenge is that you want to help everybody. Our community, the dental profession, is not that big. And so you want to try and have the maximum impact you can have. And getting to a stage where I'm comfortable saying no, but understanding why I'm saying no. And I think before, no just felt rude, not being available, not giving good service. But actually now I've reframed no that says I'm actually working on something bigger and more important for the profession.
Yeah.
So I might have to say no to that one person, but the thing I'm working on could help hundreds.
Yeah.
So it's actually getting to a point where understanding why no is okay. And I think it's reframing no in that moment
Yep.
means that person might not get your immediate attention, but trying to support the profession, I think I'm going to be able to help more people by saying no, because it gives me that headspace and that capacity to work on something bigger.
Yeah. No, and sometimes by saying yes, you're actually doing them a disservice as you are yourself as well.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay. What would be your proudest moment when it comes to FTA in terms of what you've achieved and obviously the wider group?
You said about the amount of the value of what we've sold dental practice for. I think it's that. I think extracting that sort of value for dental practice owners is brilliant. I think it makes me feel really good that we run a business that means that people can exit well, with pride and with a decent value. Because the nature of the world is there are people out there that, ethics in businesses is a massive topic. I genuinely believe that we try and do it as well as we possibly can. So when people exit, they get what they absolutely deserve for their practice. And, there's been some remarkable stories where we helped one guy sell his practice. And he got in excess of £450,000 more than he thought he was going to get. He's got a number of children. One of them has got quite severe special needs. For him and his family, that made a massive difference. What it enables them to do going forward as a family is completely different to what their outcome could have been. Things like that make me think that's a good day's work now.
Yeah, no, that's phenomenal. That's life-changing, right, for
It
anybody.
is.
Did I read a story as well? Or maybe AI must have made this up, I don't know. But I think I read a story. There's so much content about you. So when I was researching you, I was like, I need a little bit of assistance here. Please don't hallucinate because it's going to be embarrassing. But I feel like I read a story where you helped someone unlock an extra 500,000-600,000 in a practice sale, and they ended up paying off their parents' mortgage. Is that right? Or did I make that up?
Yeah. So that was it's actually Shalin Kapoor.
Oh, wow.
Many years ago. In fact, Shalin, he only reminded me of this story quite recently. It was there, but it had been filed in a cabinet way back. Yeah. And Shalin jogged that memory. But he built a practice. And he sold it back in the days when the demand was crazy, in that people were routinely paying over and above the asking price.
Yeah.
It still occasionally happens today, but for him it was just perfect. And he was able to set a practice that was relatively new, and I didn't know it at the time, but he'd use those funds to pay off his parents' mortgage.
Great story.
It's just wonderful. I mean, and he credits me with it, and I say it's nothing to do with me. I just created the environment so that he could do it. He created a practice, did the value.
Yeah.
He created that value. What was on his side, and I think within business generally, it's a very kind of unspoken topic, is timing. I think timing is really important. And he was fortunate in that at that time, the market was absolutely in his favour. But he was prepared. He took the opportunity. We worked together, and he was able to pay off his parents' mortgage, which is mad.
I mean, that's anyone's dream, really, to be able to do that for your parents. That's phenomenal.
Great. Like I say, I only got reminded of that story fairly recently, but it's pretty cool.
Great. So it was not a hallucination. That's good news.
No.
So timing, very interestingly, you mentioned timing. So you usually advise practice owners to start planning 3 to 5 years out, so they have proper time to maximize their valuation, get the systems in place, get consistency. As it happens, you've also talked a little bit about us entering into a bit of a renaissance for independent practices, which sometimes when you're in the weeds of the profession, that feels like a very abstract concept, because I mean, it is tough out there. It's a tough market day to day for many people, right? Cost of living, inflation, patients putting off, treatment decisions and that sort of thing. Of course, the NHS piece, which we've spoken about, there's a kind of a recruitment crisis. So it sometimes feels like a baptism of fire in the industry. And, also as suppliers to the industry or participants in the industry, we feel that too, because we care and we carry our client stresses. You've seen this upcoming period very much as a renaissance or an opportunity for independent practices. And so tell us more about that. How does that work, and what is it that you're seeing, and why is this a good opportunity now?
I think a lot of it sits around tech. I think until recently, the large players have been able to invest in tech, access tech, and manage it from kind of a head office point of view. That wasn't really available to the independent practice. Whereas now, with digital dentistry and lots of the AI solutions that are coming through, they're filtering down to individual practice level. So I don't think that they've had access to some of those tools, unlike some of the bigger players. So there's been this kind of sort of disparity between like the corporate end of things always feels it's had the upper hand. I don't think that's the case anymore. So I think as an independent practice, having access to the tech that's available across the board means that they can automate, they can bring in systems and processes that larger businesses are typically good at. Smaller businesses tend to be really good at culture, motivating people, having the leader on the ground. Larger businesses tend to be a bit crap at that. But they tend to be really good at processes, systems, and everything else. So if you think about, you go to your local burger joint run by Danny. Danny's going to turn out a really cool burger. It's going to be just as you want. He's going to make sure that the sauce is as you want. He's going to put in extra gherkins if you want it. A little bit of chat, and it's going to be a great burger. Next time you go in, it might be a slightly different burger, but that's just the nature of seeing Danny. You go to McDonald's, service is probably going to be a bit shit. But you're guaranteed to get a burger. It will look nothing like the picture. But you're guaranteed to get a burger. And that's the difference with the independent practice and the corporate. Really good at systems, really good at processes. But the culture isn't necessarily the same with an individual practice. When you roll into that, their access to tech, I genuinely believe the independent practice can do really well, because having a leader on site in the business is powerful. If you think about your business, if you weren't there on a day-by-day basis, your team incredible, but they will feed so heavily from your passion and your drive and the direction that you're taking it. And that's something that it's very, very hard to replicate.
So how can principals best leverage that in terms of what's at their disposal? The tech, automation, AI, process efficiency, optimization. For a lot of people that might seem kind of like, what is that? That's kind of business. That's kind of management consulting, Accenture world stuff. How can they sort of take practical steps to understand that piece and how it relates to their practice?
I think a lot of it is actually just looking at your own business and reviewing what you're doing at the moment and asking what are those manual tasks that could be automated. I'm not a fan of the term AI. Honestly, it's like I spend a bit of time on LinkedIn. Bloody hell, it's boring. Like everyone's banging on about it. It's just digitization. If we think about it as digitization, digitization of dentistry has been happening for the last 10 plus years. This is just another form of digitization. And I think that the people who are best placed to identify tech solutions to improve the services probably aren't the dentists, the owner of the practice. It's probably the people on the front desk. It's probably the nurses. It's probably somebody who works in the decontamination. It's the people who are doing these repetitive, relatively mundane tasks that could be automated. So I think it's a sit down with the team and actually find out what's being done and then take the drudgery out. Because then what you're going to do is you're going to free up the most valuable resource you have in the practice, which are your team, to then have amazing encounters with your patients, which is going to elevate the experience of dentistry. So I don't think it's just about looking at tech, AI, digital for the sake of it. It's at a granular level saying, what do we do in our business
step by step,
repetitively, that is a mundane admin task that we do not have to be doing anymore because tech can do that, and then bring in a very specific thing to do that. So rather than say, oh, we're now going to adopt AI, I don't think no business evolves like that.
No.
Any business that we have, we're constantly tweaking and turning and putting these little levers. It's the whole Dave Brailsford approach of kind of, the marginal gains. And I think it's thinking of tech in the marginal gains. So rather than chucking out the baby with the bathwater, it's just about trying to find those small things that you can do.
That compound.
But committing to continuous improvement.
No, I think to sort of sit down and map out step by step, almost on a process map, what you do, what are the handoffs between people, what are the roles, what are the responsibilities, what are the systems, and then sort of challenging every step of the way, like, why are we doing it that way? Is there a reason? Can we do it better?
Doing that, I'm pretty sure there will be a tech solution for so many of those. And where there isn't a tech solution and it has to be done by a human, that's most likely going to be your point of difference in your USP and your opportunity to create a wow service. Because if you look at it and go, I don't think we can automate that, or we don't want to, it's like, okay, well, why? Why is that bit so important. And that's where you're going to be able to really double down and impress your patients, because you've consciously said, no, we as the human team, we need to do that.
I'm huge on that as well, because I see a lot of people looking for the silver bullet. Let's get an AI voice bot in and they can handle all of our calls and it'd be great and people can book straight in. And I think ultimately this is healthcare. We're trusting people with life-changing decisions, large sums of money, high perceived risk from a patient's point of view because of that informational asymmetry, which I think is the point you mentioned on Friday. To me, it should be trust first, human touch first, where possible, and using AI and automation to scale the human touch and to sort of to make that more efficient. So I definitely agree. Corporates. So, in the sense that now independents have access to technology that corporates would only previously have access to, are corporates a threat, or are they just sort of part of the ecosystem?
I think they're just part of the ecosystem. I think what happens is the corporates get talked about a lot because they're large and they're noisy. The corporates get talked about a lot because in fairly recent years, they've acquired a lot of practices. However, I think we're coming to the end of that era. I think the majority of practices that suit the corporate model have already been acquired. And so there's still significant numbers of practices out there, but they're slightly smaller. So they don't really sit particularly well with the corporate model. Is
it a cost of capital thing as well, that acquisition pathway is
I think it's two things. I think there's the cost of capital in the cost to acquire is quite high. But also a practice has to be of a certain size to support effectively the head office cost that gets washed through a practice. So if it's below a certain size or it doesn't have the ability to grow, it doesn't really meet their spreadsheet in terms of metrics.
And what does that typically look like in terms of chairs or turnover?
So it would typically be a 3 surgery practice with potential for more. Ideally something around the 800 to 1 million of revenue at the moment with the potential for more. Because anything below that, it just doesn't really generate the profit to support the head office costs and give them the ability to grow. And there's a significant number of practices that sit within that space that are still independent. The corporates are also now starting squat dental practices. They're looking for organic growth within their practices. And some of the corporates are also creating models where they're looking to bring partners in to some of their existing practices, which is really interesting because the reason they're looking to do that is to get a leader who's got some skin in the game on site, which is exactly what an independent practice is. So if you are worried by the local practice down the road that's a corporate doing better than you, that's your fault. If you can't outpunch a corporate practice that doesn't have a resident leader on site, you need to look internally because you should.
There was a social media post by an associate, actually, I guess quite a forward-thinking associate who is in a corporate environment. I assume there's no kind of on-the-ground leader in that practice. And they said, oh, look, nothing ever happens. I want to kind of round up some of the team and have lunchtime meetings where we do like whatever, lunch and learns and that sort of thing. And they were really keen to do that to engage their team because I work with these people every day. And I want to have meetings with them and discuss how we can evolve and how we can build our presence in social media and how we can do more and how we can deliver better services to our patients. And it was just a sea of comments from people saying like, such great initiative, amazing, but like, it's going to fall on deaf ears, or you're going to piss off people above you, or, basically everyone was discouraging this associate from doing that because that it's not worth the risk in a corporate environment because the culture will just not support it. It'll almost look as if you're insubordinating head office or whatever, which is fascinating. And it just shows that, that's one isolated example, but it shows that as a private independent practice with leader on the ground, you can actually massively...
And I get it. It's challenging for corporates because they've got, there's a corporate brand, there's consistent messaging they want to be delivered into the market. So having an enthusiastic associate, let's call that associate Maverick. The danger is you do lose a degree of control over what's being said. So I do have a sympathy with the corporate in kind of wanting to control that environment. But in an independent world, you have free reign. your business, your team, your
Yeah.
strategy. You can be more nimble. You can change your position. If your team want a particular thing to happen, there's no reason you couldn't implement that the next day.
Yeah.
You really should be on your toes and dynamic. And if you're not taking advantage of those elements of being an independent practice, then
You're missing the upside.
and that's it. It is so hard running a business. There's some amazing elements that come with it, and one of them is fleet of foot and being nimble. And if you're not capitalising on that, you're going to fall into the fold of competing with corporates, and you shouldn't really be worried about corporates. You should be able to outperform them because you're a leader on your site.
Absolutely. And you can certainly outperform them on a local level for sure. Yeah. What, in your opinion, is the number one habit that makes or breaks a principal?
I think probably consistency.
Okay.
I think where they're consistent in that they show up. If they say they're going to do something, they do it. They follow through on it. They're constantly supporting their team and genuinely supporting them. Not, I went on a course last week and I've got to check in with you. So I go, Derek, are you doing all right?
Yeah.
Good. And then a week later, it pops on my phone. I come, oh, Derek, are you doing all right? Genuinely caring about the people they work with. If you can do those things consistently, so it just becomes second nature, I think you're on the right track. But the wrapper that sits around all of that is it has to be authentic. So if I'm doing it because I've had a pop-up on my phone, no, I've got to do it because I actually care. I genuinely care about you. Within any team, any moment in time, there'll be somebody that will be having a domestic issue of some sort, a grandparent that's not well. Will you check in with those people? Because we should care about them. And doing it because you care, but doing it consistently is really important, because by doing things consistently, what it's saying to your team is I have an understanding as to who you are, how you tick, and what's important. So when you then make a suggestion or you ask something to be done, they've got this back catalogue of experience of who you are, and they'll probably understand why you're asking for it to be done. You might have to explain occasionally, but you'll build up this pattern of this is who we are, this is what we do, this is why we do it. So then when you ask something to be done, it's like, oh yeah, no, I get that.
And I guess with every behavior, you're then reasserting your values and your expectations, and you're creating, I guess, a predictable environment for the team around you.
And it's jarring if people aren't consistent in behavior. It's like, who am I getting today? Am I getting like, is it Dr. Jekyll or Mr. Hyde coming in today? So being consistent, even if you're a bit of an arse, be a consistent arse. that consistency, at least people know where they're at. Some people are. I work with some people who are quite blunt, but they're always blunt, and that's just their style.
That's their style.
It's not that they're being rude; it's just a bit direct, and I'm okay with that because they're always of that. If they were nice and friendly and chatty one day, and then a bit blunt and direct the other, I'm like, what's going on here? So that consistency of who you are, it actually builds a lot of confidence and trust with your team.
And I think as humans, we are wired to dislike cognitive dissonance. So when what we expect is different to the reality, we get really frustrated. So the same is true with practice branding. Like if you expect one thing on social media, it looks amazing, and you expect to walk into what feels like a 5-star hotel in Dubai, you walk in and it's, as you say, the plastic chairs and there's mold on the wall. You think, oh, actually, you know what? It's not all it's made up to be.
That's quite hard to recover from.
Agreed.
I know during COVID era, lots of us expanded our network quite significantly, primarily through social media and Zoom and stuff. And then obviously the world reopened and we started going to events, we met people. And some of the people I met, I'm like, who are you? You are not the person I've been chatting to on social media. And the problem is on social media is quite easy because you can optimize your message and you can get the right picture and you can come up with a witty comment. And then you stand in front of someone who's like, you're not that person. So I think that congruence of who you are, how you present yourself, has to be embedded in who you really are. Because you're going to get found out at some point.
Sure. Which is why authenticity always wins, right? Authenticity always outperforms. In a world where dentistry is becoming increasingly commoditized, or at least there's a perception that it is, how should dentists go about building trust with patients in a way that isn't treatment centric, but is actually focused on the patient?
I think do good stuff. If you do good stuff, you'll build a good reputation. And I think out of doing the good stuff and building a good reputation, people will talk about you. So whether that's informally at dinner parties to friends or through Google reviews, you're going to do yourself no harm with that at all. But also, I think you're probably familiar with the daughter test.
I don't think I am.
So the daughter test is, say in a dental setting, if you're going to recommend a treatment to somebody, would you do that to your daughter?
Yeah.
If your daughter was in the chair, would you recommend the same thing? And I think if you approach every patient in that way and you just do the right thing, it is going to come back in dividends. Might not be this week or next week, but it's going to be the right thing. So where you're in that environment where you potentially could, overtreat, overprescribe, perhaps try and do something quicker than is needed, that's unlikely to help you in the long run. Whereas if you always do the right thing, you can never be wrong. And I think you can build a reputation by treating people well. You might have to go a little bit further and you might have to ask them for a review. You might have to ask for a recommendation, because these things don't just happen. I think the people who do really well with having reviews or recommendations, they ask for it. And there's a nice way to ask for it. But I think that if you do it in that way, you can still build the commercial side to your business, but you can do it in a very ethical, trust-based way. And again, it's that thing, when the head hits the pillow at the end of the night, you kind of want to go, did I do it? Did I do it the right way?
You've spoken before about like consistent action today, pays off in 6, 9, 12, 18 months from now. And so, and interestingly, Rory Sutherland on Friday spoke about this concept that as a private business owner in particular, you can make decisions with almost two lenses, one being a short-term lens, i.e. input today, output tomorrow, what does that equation look like? But also with a long-term lens. And so, but I think as humans, we're almost sometimes wired for instant gratification, and we see this in marketing actually, and I think it's a difficult balance to strike, because we want people to see results from their marketing. A lot of those results will tend to be, the tangible results will tend to be in the form of direct ROI, i.e. I put £1 in and I get £4 or £5 out, next month or later this month or whatever, which is great. And it's a great case study for us to talk about and look at, it's like, I don't want to go to a practice and be like, okay, stick 10 grand in and you get better brand awareness. They're going to be like, okay, how does that translate to practice valuation, et cetera? But certainly on the marketing side, we're finding that there's kind of an increasing obsession with short-term ROI, and that any long-term ROI or upside is kind of discounted. And so how can principals take a step back and make decisions with a longer-term lens and a longer-term time frame? Because I think there is this sort of, people are always looking for shortcuts and hacks and get this system to do composite bonding, and you know what I mean? So how...
We are in a world of, I'll have one marshmallow now as opposed to 2 marshmallows at the end of the week.
Well, that's it, yeah.
Isn't it? And it's, and we suffer with it as well. The majority of clients that I have come to me and the conversation goes something like, can you value my practice now? Put it straight to the market, and I want to be sold within 6 to 9 months. So the backswing for me to do anything to improve the performance of their business doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Literally we are up against it from day one. And I think part of it goes back to this thing around big decisions take 2 to 5 years. So they haven't just woken up in the morning and decided to come to me and to sell. They've been talking to their partner, possibly talking to their accountant, chewing this over for ages. And then they come to me. So there's no time to do anything. So I don't think that they're, as it is in your world, wanting immediate gratification. I just don't think they're talking to a guy like me soon enough. Because if they did, then I think they would get a better result, and I think they'd get a better outcome. But I think there's kind of a fear that as soon as you start talking to somebody like me, you're starting the sale process. And it's not true. I have this thing that having your business prepared to sell and selling it at some point will be connected, but don't have to be. So you can prepare your business for sale, which means actually you've got a better optimized business, probably a more enjoyable business to run, and possibly a more profitable business, which you can sell when you want. But I think there's a common misconception that when you start talking to a guy like me, what happens is you go straight into a process of getting a valuation and selling. If we can change that, And part of like the reason to highlight to people kind of owner fatigue as an issue is to say to people, I'm not pushing you to sell. What I'm pushing you to do is just pause, look at where you're at, and let's think about when you do want to get out, what that might look like, and buy some time. But it does require people to have 2 marshmallows at the end of the week, not 1 marshmallow now. And that is challenging. And as you described with, clients wanting immediate ROI, they want to see the return straight away. That's not just my problem. That's a general human issue. And I think as the world gets quicker, and because we see, sadly, so much rubbish being posted out online in particular, where people are getting these amazing results. And I always think if the results look too amazing to be true, they
probably are.
If we can get people to slow down a bit and appreciate the real value, whether that's ROI on campaigns or value on your exit, does take time to build. That would be a good thing, because people who do that, they see the results. And we know they see the results.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
It's just, wouldn't it be great if there were more of them?
And that's, selfishly, that's kind of one of the problems I'm trying to solve for as well, because the majority of people who stay with us for more than a year will stay with us. I think our average is like 38 months, which for performance marketing is great, because churn is always very high in this industry. It's obviously completely performance based, but there's a lot of people who don't make it to a year because we can't get over that initial hump, and we haven't got that runway to get them over.
And the sad thing for those people is they are literally just going to be frogs jumping from lily pad to lily pad.
That's it. That's exactly it.
They're never going to stick long enough to see the results. And it's that thing, you say, well, we need to get to, we need to do this 100 times to get the results. And they keep getting to 85, 87 times and say, no, stop. And the problem is the last 13 might have been the ones that delivered all the gold. But they never quite got there because they bailed too early. And it's a shame for them. And it's frustrating for us as service providers, but it's a shame for them ultimately.
Because you end up spending probably the majority of your time kind of servicing the, in terms of taking on new clients, onboarding, on ramp and getting them up to that level.
And what we have to be careful not to do is flex how we are and how we behave and how we deliver our services to try to deliver this ridiculous outcome in a short period of time, because it's probably not going to be sustainable, and it's probably not going to actually last. Because with my clients, from doing evaluation to selling, that's kind of a 9 to 12 month process. So we really do need them on board with what's coming on day one, because if they're not, we have to keep recycling and overcoming objections and answering, because once they get into this, as you were saying, your experience of selling a business, it's flipping hard work.
Absolutely, yeah.
So if you're not committed to it, that fracture line is going to show at some point. So you really need to make sure that people are on board at the beginning.
100%. You've got a scorecard for
Yes.
people who want to understand whether they're suffering from owner fatigue. I haven't seen it myself, but I'm assuming it's based on the 5 categories that you
honestly, it's so simple. It's based on the 5 categories. It's 7 questions. You can do it in less than a minute. You literally log on. It works on a traffic light system. It says, so for example, do you have a plan in place to exit your business? Yes, it's fully prepared. No, I haven't got a clue. And there's 7 questions, and you just answer these questions. At the moment, most people are doing it in about 35 to 37 seconds.
Oh, wow.
It does not take
really
that long.
Quick. Okay.
And immediately at the end, you get a traffic light. It's red, amber, or green. Green means you're in great shape, you're enjoying ownership, crack on. Amber means there's some signs in there of things that aren't ideal. We could do with having a conversation, because you could probably make some quite minor adjustments and be in a better shape. Red means that you're not happy and fatigue has set in. It doesn't mean you should sell your business.
It's not too late.
But you do need to take a breath. You need to take a pause and have a reset, because you could reset it in a format that works better for you, but it might be deep set fatigue, and actually selling might be the right thing for you. Many of those people, they already know that. They already know that. It's like, if you think perhaps you need to lose a bit of weight before you jump on the scales, you probably already have an idea what the scales are going to show.
Just need some validation and permission.
Exactly. So it's a very simple, quick way of giving people a heads up on where they're at. Because if it doesn't get addressed, the worst end to this is burnout. Where people just literally, they just can't cope anymore. And that's a big issue in dentistry anyway. Burnout's an issue. Horrifically, the suicide rate within dentistry is not good. Anything that we can do as providers and supporters of the profession to help to reduce the stresses and the onerous nature of owning and running a business, collectively we should do that.
Yeah, no, absolutely, I agree. I can sit and talk to you all day here. We've got a couple more questions before we wrap up. So a quick one. What's the biggest financial mistake you've ever seen a practice owner make?
So we had one guy, he bought a practice, paid quite a lot of money for it.
Yep.
Went in and on day one, ripped everything out, put in new surgeries, new reception, new colour scheme, new branding, everything. The thing that when you buy an existing business you're buying is you're paying for the past, but you're buying for the future.
Yeah.
You're paying for the past. The past has got the business to where it is so far.
Mm-hmm.
So to go in on day one and completely rip it all out and start again, you completely pissed off your team.
Yeah.
Because you've just come in and you're like scraping everything about.
Yeah.
The patients haven't got a clue what's going on.
They wouldn't recognize it.
The biggest change a business can go through is a change of ownership.
Yeah.
So change of ownership and leadership in a business is massive.
Yeah.
Do not change anything else.
Yeah.
And we had a conversation with this client and said, when you go in, we know it's not great. We know it's a bit 1970s. We know what that does. Just sit, just watch, just be for 9 months. Just watch what's going on. He couldn't bite his tongue. So he went in, spent a lot of money. Most of the team left.
Oh God.
Patients didn't like it because they went to alternative. Because what they saw was a huge investment, which in their mind they translated through. You're going to start charging me for that.
Yeah.
That's not. It was absolutely horrible. And then the other one that I've seen people do is they use a existing dental practice to fund a squat.
Okay.
So they basically leverage up on their existing business. They go and get debt against that business.
So they take the equity out.
And they go and invest. But the business they've got, it's not big enough, strong enough, robust enough, and financially secure to subsidise it. And then what happens is setting up a squat requires significant investment of your time. So you neglect this business has got more debt.
Yep.
You can see how that one plays out. That's not good. So yeah, those are two things that people do that aren't great.
Interesting. Okay, good. Now we have a segment, which is the last one, which is called The Confessional, where we hear some of the craziest and wildest story. I feel like
forgive me, David, I for sinned.
Yeah, absolutely. There you go. So that was actually a pretty wild story. I've heard another wild story that I think one of your a buyer changed his name by deed poll to match the seller's name, which in itself is I mean, that's a fascinating.
And these people were for completely different heritage as well.
Okay, so
it was the most bizarre thing in the world, and this guy thought it would be a really good idea because it would endear him to his patients. That when they ask for, say, Malcolm, Malcolm comes out.
So it was for the patients.
Yes,
right. Okay,
but the patients would have spotted it wasn't Malcolm.
Yeah, no, sure.
It was somebody else.
It's like me going out into the reception. Hi, I'm Amit Singh, Dr. Amit Singh.
It was the most bizarre thing ever.
That is brilliant. Outside of that, what's the most outrageous, unexpected, or downright wild thing that you've seen in a sale or a negotiation? I went
to a practice and I went to go and see the principal. Principal said his flat was above the practice. Said, I'll go out to my flat. I went up to his flat. The door was already open. I sat down. His partner obviously didn't realise that I was going to be in the flat. Had just come out of the shower and was walking around naked. I was like, it was a terrible situation. It was, for both of us, it was terrible. I had another one in Somerset where the principal was really nervous that the team were going to find out his practice was being valued.
Okay, yeah.
So he asked for the lights to be turned off in the practice. And one of the surgeons was over in the high street, and one of the nurses was renting a flat directly opposite. So he requested that I used a torch on my phone, and I crawled around on my hands and knees to inspect the surgery. That was a low point. That was not good.
Did you oblige?
Of course.
Well, yeah. You said you have trouble saying no sometimes. So
exactly.
You're on your knees there crawling around.
But they're generally good people. So there are some, and the last one that comes to mind is we had a practice is in the Northwest where at the last minute this deal nearly didn't go through over a coffee table.
Okay, wow.
Because the seller was adamant that it wasn't included. And the buyer said, no, it definitely was included. And they were arguing over this coffee table. And this was like a 20 quid coffee table from IKEA. And we're like, look,
I'll buy you a coffee table.
Exactly. I said, I'll go and buy you a coffee table. I'll switch them out. No, it's not the point. And what's actually quite interesting, it really wasn't anything to do with the coffee table.
Sure, yeah, of course.
It was a metaphor for kind of how the deal had gone on. But there is some weird stuff that goes on.
If ever I've learned anything from marriage, it's never about the coffee table.
No, exactly.
Very good. Well, Andy, you've been an absolute star. Thank you so much for being so generous with your time, your knowledge, your stories. I'd love to welcome you back because I feel like there's a ton more we could talk about. You are welcome to say no. I'll give you permission to say no if you don't want to come back. But yeah, thank you so much. And I can't wait to share this with the community.
No, brilliant. Lovely. Thanks a lot, Derek. It's been great fun. Thank you.
Love hearing the real stories behind the aesthetics, medical and dental industries? Make sure you follow us on Instagram and TikTok at The Patient Is Always Right for exclusive content. You can listen on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. And don't forget to watch the full episodes on YouTube. Hit follow, subscribe, and stay tuned.